To say that I'm obsessed with personal finance is an understatement, but I've struggled to find someone I can relate to who can provide sound money advice, partly because in generations past, my culture has frowned upon these types of discussions. The Check Your Money podcast was created in my quest to find a space of support and network of people just like me that want to grow financially. I'm excited to share ways you can improve your current and future financial health, set and meet money goals, and even plan for retirement in this ever-changing economy. I hope that by the end of this episode, you'll say to yourself at least once, I need to check my money today. Hi, and welcome back to Check Your Money. They say the two things you can't avoid are death and taxes. I'm not sure which is more morbid, so I'm going to go ahead and talk about death and what's known as estate planning. I'm going to discuss the importance of wills and healthcare directives. Let me start off by saying that I've lost a lot of people in my life. And if you've been listening from the beginning, you already know my dad has passed. I talk about it quite a bit, obviously because it affected me, but also because I learned from that experience about money, family, being prepared or not being prepared. I want to share that with you in the hopes that you benefit from my experience by understanding how important it is to have these discussions that we are not having with our families. Stay tuned for a glimpse in what can make a bad situation worse. So, in speaking with Maria in episode 6, I confirmed that it is an age-old thing not to talk about death plans. Even when an older person starts doing that, people will normally be like, ay, no hables así, nada te va a pasar, which means don't talk like that, nothing's going to happen to you. But come on, we're all going to die. Sorry for the spoiler alert. We don't know when, but it will happen. And before you think that planning shouldn't apply to you or doesn't apply to you, let me just tell you that you don't need a house or to have minor children to need a will. Let's just say you have adult children and you're married and you can't stand your sister-in-law. I loved my former sister-in-law. I'm just going to throw that out there. But let's just say you can't stand yours. You and your spouse die tragically. Sorry, all hypothetical here, but just stay with me. But you die a half hour apart. You go first. So depending on your state, about the timing, not about the heir part, but depending on your state. So for the first whole half hour, your spouse was your heir. Your spouse owned all your stuff at the other table. They owned all your stuff. Now they die, right? And by stuff, I mean like your money, your assets, that kind of stuff. So now a half hour passes and your spouse dies. Guess who got your stuff? Not your adult kids. Your sister-in-law. That's right. If a court decides that your sister-in-law is your spouse's next of kin or heir, then she just inherited all your assets. And again, what's considered your assets? That's money in your bank accounts, your car, your personal valuables like jewelry and stuff like that. All of that gets passed on to beneficiaries. And again, in that situation, because of, legal mumbo jumbo, now she owns everything. So estate planning isn't also just about material things. It also includes medical treatment, guardianship, and even pet ownership. Think about that sister-in-law getting your dog. Okay, if that's not motivation to draw up a will, I got nothing else. The fact is that only 1 in 6 millennials actually have a will. And as usual, education and race are key factors in who has a will or a living trust. For example, according to a study I read, so likely a sample of people, not necessarily a nationwide statistic, but those with only a high school education are unlikely to have a will. 28% of those with no college education have a will, while 58% of Americans with postgraduate degrees have an estate plan. And among the largest racial groups, Hispanics are least likely to create an estate plan. 26% of Hispanic Americans have a will. That's a quarter of us, guys. whereas 31% of Black Americans and 45% of white Americans reported having a will. So we're at like a quarter of the population of us have a will, but of white Americans, almost half of them have a will. And having a will isn't just an older person thing. It's actually probably more important for younger people to have a will. Take the story I just made up. Well, what if you had a child and that sister-in-law fights for custody when you and your spouse had already decided you wanted your sister to have custody? Well, 78% of millennials, so ages 18 to 36, and 64% of Generation Xers, so 37 to 52, do not have a will. That's a whole lot of fighting, guys. And those who don't have it, what's the big reason? Like, what's your reason? Chances are you either just haven't gotten around to it, or you don't feel you have enough assets to leave anyone. You might feel like estate planning is too complicated of a process or that it doesn't apply to you. But if you worked hard to acquire these assets and create a life for your loved ones, it makes sense to protect these assets. Or you might think it's expensive or complicated. And don't get me wrong, you can get a big to-do lawyer and it could probably cost a lot. Or you could download something online like on LegalZoom and sign it. Some states don't even require that you get this thing notarized. Check with maybe legal aid and see if they offer services. Or get a lawyer to do a simple will that can start at like $300, ballpark, and of course, depending like on where you live. Because anything can happen, but estate planning is within your reach. Can you write your own? You can. A will is actually legal if it's written and signed in your own handwriting. If you do it like this, it actually doesn't even need to be signed by witnesses. But if you go this route, your family can come across issues if it's not clear or if it goes against state law. And the state law is what prevails, not what you want. So if you want something, again, that goes against state law, it doesn't matter. Just because you wrote it down, it doesn't matter. Another way you can do it and save some money is to have it written up by a paralegal. If you've got a simple situation, this might be a good option for you. But definitely a lawyer is a way to go if you want it to be clear and according to your state law. So, and this reminds me, if you have a will drawn up and you move to another state, you might want to have that will checked by a paralegal or a lawyer in the state that you moved to, because the state that you live in is the state law that is followed. Okay, so even if, let's just like for me, I had mine drawn up in Connecticut, I need to have mine checked now in Florida because I don't know if, what I have in there is according to Florida law. Once you actually have a will, keep it somewhere safe. You can keep it at home with other important documents, like in a fireproof box. But make sure people know how to get in that box and where to find it. If you had a lawyer draw it up for you, they will actually also keep a copy in their records. My lawyer that I had draw mine up said that she goes through the obituaries every day to see if any of them are clients that she has a will for, and she reaches out to the families. If you can get an emailed copy, which I was able to do, that's great too, as long as you send it to someone else, or maybe like to someone's, and has to be somebody you trust, obviously. And I'll get into this a little more later as well, but send it to somebody you trust. But think about this, and don't misunderstand me. This issue is among all cultures, obviously, but many Hispanics are first and second generation Americans, Hispanic families. This means that either us or our parents, and for some our grandparents, they've made the sacrifice to provide for their family with financial comfort and stability. So we know how important it is to set up your family for success at any available chance. So after this sacrifice, wouldn't you want to make sure that your family is like well managed after you're gone? And this is part of what we call generational wealth, like building this generational wealth and protecting it and keeping it for the ones that come after you. And I've said the word will 1,000 times already. So let me move on to another related concept, advance directive, which again, I'll dive into in a bit. But first, let me just say that a study published by the National Institute of Health found that in the US Hispanic population, less than half have completed an advance directive, one of the most important estate planning documents. So forget your stuff, right? This is about what happens when I'm laid up in the hospital. What do I want? What if I can't communicate it at that time? That's what this is about. So they speculate that the lack of estate planning is because we're entrusting our end of life decisions to our family verbally instead of through a written estate plan document. So, excuse me while I bust out laughing, because speaking for Hispanics, and I don't know who wrote that particular story, but speaking for Hispanics, the lack of a written plan document is not because we're verbalizing our wishes. If there's one thing you get out of my podcast, if you're not Hispanic, it's that we are not talking about this stuff with our families. I'll say it one more time. We're not talking about this stuff. Latinos are not doing this. If we bring it up, they think we're trying to kill them off. I wish I was kidding, but I'm not. Ask a friend if you've got somebody that's a Latino. Ask them what happens if they talk to their families about this stuff. It is not pretty, but you know what? I'm going to talk about why it's necessary. And sometimes you're going to have to get through the rough stuff because it will get rougher if you don't. If you want to avoid or at least minimize the family BS, being prepared and having these discussions is key. I don't know if you've heard about Anchor, but it is seriously the easiest way to make a podcast. The very best part about it is that it's free. They have creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone, your computer, or your tablet. I was able to easily set up my podcast right from my iPad. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it could be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, and many more. And last but not least, you can actually make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. And because you're able to get sponsors right from your site, it just makes it so much easier. So it's everything you need to make a podcast in one place, which makes it so easy for anyone to use. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. So let's dig in. And while I'm dropping knowledge, I'll also be dropping my personal experience. My dad died unexpectedly. Literally. Wasn't sick, nothing, just died. On Mother's Day, 2009, 4 p.m., I got the call that changed my life. He was 63 years old. He worked for a real estate company, a real estate management company, and they owned the office building. If I'm not mistaken, the owner was the real estate commissioner at the time of New Jersey, and he valued my dad and had lots of connections. I mean, this man actually had like a motorcade, I think it's called, of all the cops in North Bergen. I think it was North Bergen where we had the funeral. But anyway, literally, if you guys are familiar with New Jersey at all, anybody, Kennedy Boulevard in Union City, North Bergen area is super busy street. Like I think it's maybe 6 lanes across, 6 lanes. I don't know, but super busy, always traffic, crazy. And the guy's name was Bob Pimenta, actually. And he had the whole street blocked off so that we could get to the funeral from the cemetery from the funeral. This guy was amazing. But anyway, so he had, like I said, he had lots of connections. And I also happened to know the lawyer in the group because he represented me in my house closing when I lived in New Jersey. So the second my dad died, I immediately thought, oh, okay, I need to call Jeff. Okay, maybe not immediately thought, but you know what I mean. I need to call Jeff. Jeff said he'd do some digging and he'd get back to me. Now, mind you, Sunday afternoon, Jeff takes my call because they were all tight. As it turns out, Jeff found out that my dad used a lawyer in the building. It wasn't Jeff, because Jeff just did like the house closings and whatnot, like real estate lawyer. So he found out that my dad used a lawyer in the building to create his will. I had no idea my dad even had a will. I just thought I gotta call Jeff. I don't even know why I called Jeff. It wasn't to find out if my dad had a will. I think it was just like, call Jeff, let everybody know my dad passed. I don't even know. I can't even remember now. But again, I had no idea my dad had a will, right? So I'll skip to the next day just to stick with the lawyer will topic. So the next day, lawyer calls. And when I speak to that guy, I found out that my dad left me as sole beneficiary and executrix. I have 2 siblings. I'm definitely the oldest, but I have 2 siblings. A beneficiary, for those who don't know, is the person who, in layman's terms, gets everything. The executrix is basically an executor, right? But it's the female version of, again, in other words, who is in charge. So imagine this. I'm at the cemetery trying to buy a plot, and that story's next, with my siblings and my mom. They were divorced, but still, my mom was a big part of this. And I get a call that says, oh, your dad said you're in charge and you get everything. FML. Great, Dad. Thanks. I have to make this announcement now. Lovely. The funny thing is, there was nothing to get. Because, oh, by the way, the lawyer tells me, oh, he was bankrupt and had just discharged not too long ago. And as for being in charge, reminder, I'm a Latina. Good luck with trying to enforce that. My mom was in charge, okay? Any other way was just not worth the fight. You know how you hear these dumb kids talking about, oh, I'm 18, or oh, I'm 21, I do what I want. When you have Latin blood, you do not do what you want. Like, pretty much never. And it don't matter, like, there was no way I was going to fling a little piece of paper around to my mom and be like, oh, I'm legally in charge. Yeah, no, that was just not going to fly. Now, why am I bringing this up? So if he was bankrupt and I let my mom decide everything, case closed, right? Well, no. There's definitely some matters at hand that had to be dealt with. And there was definitely some give and take. With lots of yelling, loud discussions. And at one point, me walking out very mad, barefoot. That was not one of my brightest moments. But anyway, how did he die? I can tell you what the coroner wrote on the death certificate, but I chose not to get an autopsy. This was a lengthy, loud discussion. I'm a pull off the Band-Aid quick kind of person, and I also live 3 hours away. I wanted to get back home and get under my covers and hide from the universe fast. But more importantly, the procedure wouldn't have brought my father back, so I figured, what's the point? I tend to close my eyes, plug my nose, and jump, okay? This was my version of that. And after the lengthy, loud discussion, I was able to do this my way. And I'm not going to say it doesn't get brought up every once in a while, but I got my way on this one. How did he want to be buried? Or did he want to be buried? Yeah, we really don't know. I think he wanted to be cremated. And someone else had mentioned he wanted to be cremated. My mom is dead set, no pun intended, against that. I actually want to be cremated, and my mom's already told me make sure somebody else is in charge because she's not going to do it. But again, lengthy, loud discussion. We compromised on a mausoleum. So that's the wall thing. So he's in a wall in North Bergen, New Jersey. That's where like they put you like in the thing. And I don't know. I'm just picture like a dresser. Okay. It's one of those things. He died on a Sunday, like I said, Mother's Day. Wake was Tuesday. Funeral Wednesday. Emptied out his apartment Thursday. Friday cleaned it. Dropped off his leased truck to GMC and drove my butt back to Connecticut. Oh, wait, and his stuff, okay? He owned a bit of jewelry. He had one particular necklace and a charm that he had my entire life, as long as I can remember. And I was ready to throw down. And I'm not going to lie, I think we almost did. But the only thing this was like the only thing that where I pulled my I'm the oldest, I decide card because I wanted that necklace. They didn't really argue about his records or record player, which I also really wanted. So I got that too. After I get home, I have to start calling all of the utilities. And I can't remember what else, but I had to call and let them know that he was deceased. Some demanded payment of the final bill. Good luck with that. He was bankrupt. So, did I just get into all of that to bring you bochinche, gossip? No. I want to break this down and tell you my fantasy of how this should have gone had we had the discussion before he died. To the extent of end of life discussions with my dad, this was the extent of it. If anything ever happens to me, I have a safe deposit box in whatever bank, I can't remember. Guess the number. I don't know, Dad. What is it? 69. All right, Dad. Funny. So the only thing I knew for sure was that he had a box. And my dad was a jokester, always with stories, so I didn't believe the whole 69 thing. Well, wouldn't you know, as it turns out, after going through his papers, it was actually number 69. I don't know how he managed to get the bank to give him that box, but he did. And after 4 hours at the bank to get them to open it, and I can't even remember what the struggle was that made it so long, it was empty. Not even a dust bunny, not a feather, not a gotcha Norma, just air. I drove all the way to New Jersey, sat there for 4 hours for nothing. There was nothing in it. There was nothing in it. So, some lessons and personal advice. So this is kind of like where I'm going with it, what I want you guys to get out of this, what I would like for you guys to get out of this. Tell your people who your lawyer is that they need to contact if you have a will. I lucked out because I knew to call Jeff, or I thought to call Jeff. If you feel comfortable, like I said before, email somebody your stuff, a trusted someone, not necessarily the people involved either. Email them a copy of your will. 3 people have an emailed copy of mine. When drawing up a will, name a beneficiary and executor, but also name a contingent, which is a backup beneficiary and executor. Why? Well, what if your beneficiary, you only name one person and that person dies before you or with you, or really doesn't want to do it? This way there's a backup. Probate can be lengthy and expensive, and that's what would happen if you die without a will. And then the court, usually based on state law, will decide who your rightful heir is. All right, so let's just say you don't have kids and the brother you can't stand, I love my brother, I'm just saying, but okay, so the brother you can't stand gets your money. And you would have rather a charity get that money before he saw a penny of it. Then you need a will. And while this wasn't my situation because we were all grown, but what if you have minor children? You don't have a will. You have a sister. Your spouse has a sister. Both sisters want your kid or your kids. Think about that for a second. Do you really want to put your kids through this? Do you really want to put your moms through watching the fighting and the court battles? Or both parents want the kids? Whatever, like, you get my point. Guys, you have to talk about this stuff. You have to decide who gets your kids. You have to talk to these people and make sure they're okay with that. And then you have to get this guardian assigned in your will. As far as the who's in charge thing, the executor, while I thank my dad for thinking so highly of me, although maybe it just had to do with me being the oldest, I don't ever want to do the executor thing again. My mom says it's an honor. And I said, well, yeah, if you could just honor Nancy with that, my sister, I'd appreciate it. I don't want to be honored again. What I wanted to do was crawl up into a ball under my covers and be left alone. What I didn't want was to be calling Verizon Wireless to argue about a stupid bill. At the very least, when you pick a person, tell that person. I think a little resentment could have been avoided had we all known ahead of time I was legally in charge. And again, I say legally because, my mom. But like I said, ultimately, this just meant dealing with the BS decisions. Because again, my mom, who I love. Just saying. If you have a family heirloom of some sort, like I talked about that necklace that we all wanted, or I don't know, there's like a special pot that belonged to abuela, whatever. A will spelling out who specifically gets what will save a lot of arguing. And what about everything else? I personally have a preference for my burial. I have this stipulated in my will, and I've talked to both my kids about it. So everybody's on the same page. Everybody knows what I want. My lawyer actually said you should keep this separate from your will, because what she said was that by the time people get to your document, they will likely already have made those decisions without knowing what you wanted, right? And like I said, we were already at the cemetery by the time my dad's lawyer got back to me. So let's just say I had won the whole cremation argument, right? If he had stipulated he wanted to be buried in that will, I would have been like, oops. I mean, okay, probably a little more devastating than that, but you get my point. And besides a will, what else can you do or should you do to avoid the loud discussions? I'm going to tell you about something you probably haven't heard of. I learned about it in my estate planning class, and it is $5 to download. $5. It's called 5 Wishes, and it's amazing. So it's a document. It's like a 12-page thing. But it's a document that contains medical, personal, emotional, and spiritual components for end-of-life stuff. You can also use this as a guide to have these awkward and tough discussions with your family, but also with your doctor, so he or she can answer any of the medical related concerns or wishes that you might have. 5 Wishes was introduced in 1996 as a Florida-only document, but it's now a nationwide document with the help of the American Bar Association's Commission on Law and Aging and other medical experts. It combines a living will and a healthcare power of attorney, so the legal stuff, but also the personal end-of-life stuff like comfort care and spirituality. 5 Wishes is available in 28 languages and in Braille. There's also an online version called 5 Wishes Online, and it lets you complete the document by using an online interface or computer, or print out a blank version, and then you could just, handwrite it. The 5 Wishes documents are legally valid in most states. Some states will require some specific additional forms or mandatory notices. If you live in one of these states, you could still use it to help guide the conversation and put your wishes in writing. And you can attach the additional required forms. If you go on the website and just Google 5 Wishes document, you'll see it come up. You'll when you go on that, there'll be a link to the states so you could check yours. Let me break it down. So Wishes 1 and 2 are both legal documents. Once they're signed, they meet legal requirements for an advance directive for 44 states and the District of Columbia. So when I say most states, I mean most states. In the remaining 6 states, which are Indiana, Kansas, New Hampshire, Ohio, Oregon, and Texas, a statutory form is required, and you have to attach the state document if you want to use the 5 Wishes document as a guide. Again, check the website and you'll get some direction if you live in one of those 6 states. Wishes 3, 4, and 5 are just unique documents to this, 5 wishes thing. You're not going to really find it anywhere else. They talk about comfort care, spirituality, forgiveness. Yeah, I said forgiveness. And final wishes. So, which one? The person I want to make care decisions for me when I can't. So this section is an assignment of healthcare agent. So it's where you're assigning your person, also called either proxy, a surrogate, representative, or healthcare power of attorney. This is the person you're going to choose to make medical decisions for you on your behalf if you are unable to speak for yourself. You're going to pick your main person, but also a second and third choice in case your first choice is unable or unwilling to make the decision. Someone very close to me lost their dad at 16. He was next of kin. He had to make the decision to pull the plug on his dad at 16. This is why you need to do this, guys. Think about that. This man is now 40 years old and has that weighing on him to this day. If you choose to download this form, I want you to know that it's really helpful because it literally has a breakdown of the types of people you might want to or not want to choose. It also further specifies things that you want them to decide or be able to do, like apply for Medicare for you or moving you to another state. So, I mean, it really gets down into it. Things you probably just haven't even thought about. Wish 2, the kind of medical treatment I want or don't want. This section is the living will part, which it's a definition of what life support means to you and when you would and would not want it. For example, do you want life support treatment or not if you're close to death, or if you're not expected to recover, or if you're in a coma? Again, I mean, this document gets into it. Wish 3, how comfortable I want to be. This section talks about comfort care. So what type of pain management you want, personal grooming, bathing instructions, and whether you want to know about options for hospice care. Again, it really gets into the choices, like real deep. Section 4, or wish 4, sorry. How I want people to treat me. This section speaks about personal matters like, do you want to be at home, or do you want somebody to pray at your bedside, or do you want certain pictures near your bed or in your room? So just, personal stuff. Wish 5, what I want my loved ones to know. This section deals with matters of forgiveness. I'm going to leave that alone, but you go check it out. How you wish to be remembered, and final wishes about funeral or memorial plans, like down to if you want specific songs or readings, that kind of stuff. So once you're done with all that, then it gets signed and witnessed, but also it lets you know if your state requires notarization. So this is like a complete document. So that's it. I mean, I would say that it's simple, but we all know this will not be simple to talk about with our family members, but it's so important. Please take my personal experience as an example of the drama you want to avoid. Side note, we're all fine now, but I really wish I knew how my dad wanted things. It would have saved some loud discussions. Estate planning documents are a great way to make sure your assets are distributed to who you want them to be distributed to. So to recap, a will lets you be in the driver's seat in choosing beneficiaries, who gets your stuff, and choosing who will be in charge of taking care of everything, executor. If you have minor children and you don't want them to have everything right away, like if you die tomorrow, sorry, but let's just say, a trust is actually how you do that. And I don't want to complicate matters, but that's how you would do it. It's called a trust. Personally, you need a lawyer for that part. I mean, if you have minor children and you don't want them to have everything right away, you just want to make sure that you have it just really set up. Again, I know I didn't really get into that, but again, highly recommend a lawyer for that. Like I said, I mean, I don't have minor kids, but I actually have a trust set up. There's no way at 21 and 22 years old that I want my children to have access to all the life insurance, paranoia, Norma, but life insurance and assets, like if I die tomorrow. So just, I'm going to, throw it out there. The way I have it set up, they already know this, so I'm not, saying anything they don't know. But just to give you an idea, like if I die tomorrow, God forbid, they get a portion of sad money. That's what I'm going to call it, sad money. I talked about how much I blew when my dad died. So they get enough to pay for their student loans, and the rest sits, right? It sits in this trust. I designated a certain amount for a first house, not enough to buy a house, but enough to help with like the down payment. A certain amount for a first wedding. The lawyer made me specify whether all weddings or first wedding. I'm like, I don't know. First wedding, I guess. I don't know. What if they get married 10 times? Okay, first. And then a bucket at 30. So a certain percentage of what's left at 30. And the rest, I think it was like at 40 or something like that. But this is just to show you could decide whatever you want. So if you don't want them to have a sudden windfall, if you have like a big life insurance policy, or you have, a lot of money in your retirement plan or something like that, then this is what you should set up. And, talk to a lawyer, but this is what you should set up so that it gets distributed like a little bit at a time. And again, if this is what you want, right? So I hope that I've motivated and inspired you to think about estate planning, and know that even if you think it doesn't apply to you, it really does. Please save your family the heartache from when you're gone. It'll be hard enough to deal with the grief of losing you. Check your knowledge. I know a lot of people have been affected by COVID in regards to their jobs. Last episode, I talked about some job search engines that you can go on. So, to try to find a job. If you've been affected, this might also be a good time to look into training opportunities. My kid called last week about his school offering a coding boot camp for $11,000. It was a 24-week coding boot camp. $11,000. I said, I think you can learn that for free. So I reached out to some people, and of course, some stuff started popping up on my feed because, Big Brother's watching you on Facebook and everywhere else. And I found some stuff. And actually somebody, Yo Quiero Dinero, had posted something on Instagram as well. So I was like, oh yeah, like I had already found some of that stuff, and some stuff was new to me, which was great. So what popped up on my feed, though, was something called Upskill. So UPSKIL. Sorry, 2 L's. Upskills offering digital skills and soft skills and top 10 career certifications for free through March of 2021. You have to have a LinkedIn account to start coursework with them, but check them out, and they've got a lot of options there. Codeacademy.com offers the basics of HTML and CSS. So this is, computer stuff, helping you understand the fundamentals of coding. Those 2 particular ones are free, but they have a lot of other courses. Also, and this is the one I saw on Yo Quiero Dinero. If you go on, and Yo Quiero Dinero, guys, sorry, that's another podcast. And I follow her on Instagram and Facebook. But anyway, if you go on Google's Digital Garage, they also offer some classes that include the certification for free. I really hope this helps, guys. Thanks again for listening to the Check Your Money podcast. I would love to hear from you. You can email me feedback at norma@checkyourmoney.today. And remember to subscribe, follow, and rate at Apple or Google Podcasts or wherever you're listening. Also, if you can, please leave a review if you're enjoying this podcast. It's the easiest way to help it grow and be able to help continue to motivate and inspire others. The information provided in the Check Your Money podcast, associated social media accounts, and website is intended solely for the personal, non-commercial use of the user who accepts full responsibility of its use. While we have taken every precaution to ensure that the content of the aforementioned is both current and accurate, errors can occur. We accept no responsibility or liability for any errors or omissions in the content. The information provided by Check Your Money and its affiliated entities is general in nature, provided for educational purposes only, and should not be considered to be legal, tax, accounting, or investing advice. In all cases, you should consult with professional advisors familiar with your personal factual situation for advice concerning specific matters before making any decisions.